Let's throw some jabs.
The fight starts now!
All right, Sergio, we are days away from the biggest fight of the year. Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin, the war to settle the score, the trilogy-completing fight for two of the biggest stars of this generation. Canelo enters this fight as a significant favorite, but both guys have a lot on the line, not the least of which is getting a clear win after two razor-close fights. So, Sergio, who is this fight more important for? Canelo or Triple G?
Canelo has more at stake in this fight. He has to prove and show to boxing fans, the haters, the critics, everybody, that he's still a pound-for-pound talent. He's not the number one. He's not the head honcho in the pound-for-pound list anymore. He got booted off in the top, three. So now he needs to prove that he's still the goods, and he needs to do it against Golovkin, someone he hasn't beat clearly. This rivalry, this bitter rivalry goes back all the way to 2017, Mannix. I mean, we still don't have a clear winner here. Split decision, majority draws. We need a clear decision winner, and I think we're going to get it this time around. Not only because they're bitter rivals and they know each other well and they're familiar with each other's power and everything else, but it's time. It's time. Whenever you do something over and over, you're bound to find a way. And in boxing, that way is a knockout. And in every great trilogy, we get to see knockouts. So I think we're gonna get something fantastic for the fans, and we're finally gonna finish this trilogy and put it behind us.
Yeah, I think it's an important fight for Canelo. 2 losses in a row would demystify him. A loss to Golovkin would probably force him to take a 4th fight against his rival to try to get some revenge for that loss. But I look at Triple G, and I see this fight as potentially being legacy defining. Golovkin has been one of the biggest stars in boxing for more than a decade. Ever since he came to the US and started knocking guys out on HBO and now on DAZN, he became one of the most recognizable figures in boxing. But if you look at his resume, it's not the strongest. You've got guys like Daniel Jacobs on there. That was probably his best win. David Lemieux, that was a world title fight. That was another quality win when that fight happened. After that, you look at his record, and there are not a lot of W's next to the big names. Now, you can certainly argue that Golovkin deserved to win the first fight against Canelo. There was at least one atrocious scorecard in that fight. He was probably robbed of a decision there, but he didn't get it. He lost, I think, fairly the second fight against Canelo. So he kind of needs this win to truly establish himself as one of the great fighters of this generation. He is undoubtedly one of the most entertaining guys. He has been a knockout artist ever since he picked up a pair of boxing gloves. But in terms of resume, in terms of legacy, I think he needs this win, because if he loses to Canelo, he goes off, probably retires. Does he get into the Hall of Fame? Maybe. I just think his resume is just a little bit thinner, whereas Canelo, even if he loses, he's still in his early 30s. He still has time to burnish that resume over the next couple of years. For Golovkin, this may be his last shot.
You vote for the Hall of Fame, don't you, Mannix? You're telling me you won't vote. You won't vote for Triple G to make the Hall of Fame first ballot?
I haven't thought too much about it at this point, but
answer my question.
I haven't thought too much about it, to be honest with you. He's not retired. I think about guys.
You will be voting for him. You will be voting for him in the Hall of Fame, just like everyone else will. Triple G, he took over. When he came to the States, he knocked out everybody they put in front of him. It's not his fault who they match him up with. He was the big drama show, and he ended it in fantastic fashion. He had everybody clamoring to watch Triple G fights. He had Mexican style. Mexicans loved him. He had that aura about him. I think not only is he Hall of Fame material, but he's one of the greatest middleweights to ever put on gloves. And that's a lot. That's a lot to carry with. That's a big burden. Just because he doesn't have the names associated with his record doesn't make him any less great. He beat Canelo the first time around, whether he didn't get the decision or not. People already know that. The second time was another close fight. This third fight around, we're finally, I believe, and a lot of people in the business, we're gonna get a clear winner. Not only because of age and familiarity, but they don't like each other. They're bitter rivals. So with bitter rivalries comes a sweet decision. I think we're gonna get a sweet knockout in this time around, and it's great for everybody around. I think it's time we finally do it.
Sergio, I couldn't agree more that it wasn't Golovkin's fault that he couldn't get the big names. You look at all the big names that avoided him during his prime years, from Miguel Cotto to Sergio Martinez. Even Canelo made him wait a couple of years longer than most people wanted him to wait for that fight to happen. But the reality is, you are what your resume says you are. Like, you're only as good as the fighters that you beat. And I look at the Jacobs fight, that was a tremendous win. I look at the Lemieux fight, that was a quality win. After that, there is a drop-off in terms of his competition. So all I'm saying is that, to answer the question, who is this fight more important for? I think Canelo's legacy is largely satisfied, largely set. He is the undisputed champion at super middleweight. He has fought big fight after big fight for almost a decade right now. He is, to me, secure. Golovkin, a little bit more questionable at the top.
I'm gonna flip the tables on you. Okay, Andre Ward made the Hall of Fame, and I think he's a great fighter, one of the greatest in the last 20 years. I believe it belongs in the Hall of Fame first ballot. Who was the greatest opponent he ever beat? What Hall of Famers did Andre Ward beat?
Stop. Beat Sergey Kovalev twice, won the 168-pound Super 6.
Okay, Sergey Kovalev, that was his last fight. Who did he beat? What Hall of Fame fighter did he beat before then?
He beat everybody but Lucien Bute in his weight class at 168, and then he went to 175 and fought Kovalev, who was at the time, at the peak of his powers, was the crusher at that point. It is completely different. Those two are awful examples.
No, they're not awful examples. Look, I believe Ward is a great fighter and belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'm just making a case for Golovkin being a first ballot Hall of Famer as well. It's not his fault he was put into an era where he didn't have the Hall of Fame names. He didn't have those great old lions that he can take over. It's not his fault, and just like it wasn't Andre Ward's fault, he just beat everyone they put in front of him. And if Kovalev is the name that you're putting at the high standard, that was his last fight. And Kovalev's not even in the Hall of Fame. So same thing here with Golovkin.
Okay, well, two things. One, Kovalev's not retired, so we don't know what's going to happen with Sergey Kovalev when his career is all said and done. And did you or did you not watch the Super 6 tournament that was on Showtime? That was all the best guys at 168. Andre Ward went to that tournament. He was not the favorite. He wound up beating all the top guys, including Carl Froch, at the very end, and wound up establishing himself as the top guy at super middleweight. It is apples and oranges comparing the resumes of Andre Ward and Gennady Golovkin.
Gennady Golovkin at least faced the Hall of Famer. I mean, why are we turning this into a resumes thing? I just compared the two because
it's about
Canelo
the Hall of
is a
Fame.
Hall of Famer. Canelo is a great fighter. Canelo is a name that's recognized around the world. That's what Golovkin lost to. You know, Andre Ward stayed perfect all throughout. Yes, he wiped out a division, but what Hall of Famers are in that division? I mean, that's just my argument right there. Golovkin's in the same boat. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who he beat, it's how he beat them. And he cleaned out a division as well at middleweight.
Yeah, well, not really. Technically, he didn't clean out the division at middleweight. So all I'm saying, Sergio, to bring it back full circle, is that this fight to me is more important to Golovkin because he needs that top flight name on his resume. Someone that would surpass Jacobs as his best win, and Canelo Alvarez would surpass Jacobs as the top win.